Welcome to the Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. My name is Lauren Christie, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Canadian Meetings and Events Committee, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. With the growing needs from your employees and the attendees of your meetings, we're going to chat about how to get started, whether you're looking at it from an organizational level or how to simply incorporate some best practices into your meetings and events. Joining me in the discussion today is Philippe Caputo. He is a senior producer on the Rogers Communications corporate events team based here in Toronto. Welcome, Philippe.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So glad to be here.
Also joining me today is Kirby Court. He is the CEO of the Calgary TELUS Convention Center. Welcome, Kirby.
Hello, Lauren. Thanks so much. It's a privilege to be here today.
Thank you both so much. So we're going to dive right into it. Philippe, I'm going to start with you. I would just like to know, Rogers Communications, do you have a DE&I strategy in your organization? And what are some of the key components that people should know about?
We do. We are actually just wrapping up our second year on a 5-year strategy plan. This plan was built to really help us guide through a journey, right? And there is always an opportunity to look back and reassess the plan, see what's working well, what isn't. But big part of what we do is really empowering our employees to bring their whole selves to work. We really, want to empower our employees to feel like they can be who they are. We also have several different employee resource groups, one of which I'm part of the leadership team called the Spectrum that represents our 2S LGBTQ plus community. We have several events on DEI and allyship. We also try to make our hiring practice always more inclusive. We have programs like Ted Rogers Awards and Ted Rogers Community Grants that are focused on supporting equity-deserving groups. And for our customers, we really look into ways of supporting the needs of all Canadians. We also have All In, which is our media services for free creative services and media advertising space. This is all offered to community organizations.
That's amazing. So it sounds like Rogers has quite a lot of active programs in place. Kirby, what about you at the Convention Center? Are there programs in place? What have you done to help DEI strategy in your organization?
Thanks so much, Lauren. Yes, we, like most organizations, we have our policies and procedures in place, and employees, they sign off on that every year. It is something that we review on an annual basis. And but more importantly, it's there to protect the employee and the employer in our employment agreement. But more importantly, what's vital for us is to listen to our employees, our clients, and our community to be a truly opening and welcoming center as a facility of mass gathering. We're bringing the world into our venue. The organization is continuing on its journey and training. I would say we are at the early stages of advancing our organization, but it's an exciting journey, and it's one that will continue to be a journey. You just don't stop tomorrow because, yes, we've achieved something. We also try to strive to be a thought leader from the perspective of, here's an organization that is starting on their journey, and what are the lessons learned as we progress through this journey. And so it's a wonderful opportunity, and we've also just went through the process of becoming Rainbow registered. Was the first convention center in Canada to be Rainbow registered. And so that journey has taken us down some wonderful avenues, but most importantly, some fantastic conversations.
And Rainbow Registered, for our listeners that don't know, it is the only safe space inclusion program for the LGBT plus community in Canada. So it's the only standard that exists out there right now that certifies or accredits a business for being a safe space. And so Kirby, the fact that the Convention Center went through that recently and became the first convention in Canada to be Rainbow Registered, I think is pretty amazing. But you told me a story once, and I'd love for our listeners to hear it again. It all started because someone came up to you and said, we should put our pronouns in our signature block. Talk a little bit about why it's important to just not react, but to actually have strategies and follow programs like the one some of the Rogers programs that are installed, and the Rainbow Register that you're now following. Why? Tell me about that story.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that came out of that discussion. Thanks, Lauren, for the reminder of that conversation. it was really interesting because the staff were having this conversation about pronouns. They're wanting pronouns on their emails and wanting to put pronouns on business cards and all these sorts of things in it. And it came up in our leadership meeting. And it's important as a leader when you're in these environments to actually cause a pause. And let's have a conversation about what's not being talked about, or let's have a conversation on the why or the yes and on this. And so when I asked the question, well, why do you want to do this? Well, everybody's doing it. Well, so-and-so at this facility is doing it. Well, that's great. Do you know what it means? And you could hear crickets. And it's like, okay, there's the first problem. So let's pause for a second. And how about we go out and and talk to a professional in industry, and let's have some training done for our folks. So everyone is inclusive in the discussion. Everybody has a firm understanding. And when we have completed that, it's a voluntary thing. It's not something you're going to mandate. But if people who want to identify and place their pronouns on their signature or on their business cards, then we'll offer that. But everyone must complete the training before that happens, from the seat of the CEO down to the casual worker. Everyone must complete this program before we can do this. And what that revealed was so many aha moments in the journey. And that even echoed even further about why it is a journey, and how some people will identify in this space super easily, and others they still struggle today to get their head around the pronouns. So we need to allow that vulnerable discussion to happen in a safe space. And it was interesting, between that training and a couple of others that we've done and the Rainbow certification, overnight I had a different team showing up for work. They could going to Felipe's comment earlier, they could show up and be themselves. There's no masks. This is a safe space. And now we see that transferring over into our customer base as well. It's like, you guys are doing something different over there. And it's not about flying a flag. It's about walking and talking.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. One thing I firmly believe is that training is so key, because you kind of don't know what you don't know. And, full disclosure, I'm a middle-aged gay man, but my experience is very different from many other people in the LGBTQ plus community. So what I have learned over the last couple of years is all been a lot of new stuff to me too. So not everybody knows everything, and so the training is just so key. Philippe, why do you think it's important that other organizations follow suit, whether they're well down their journey like Rogers Communications or just starting out like the Convention Center? Why do you think it's important?
Well, you just mentioned there, right? Like that each one of us have a very different experience. And unless we put ourselves on each other's shoes, we won't be able to really understand and recognize what that is. I feel that organizations nowadays, they have the opportunity and the responsibility to show up and to really do the work to, divide the gap between these different groups. We all must do our part, and together we can definitely do more. Here at Rogers, as I mentioned, we are trying our best to use our pantry of assets with All-In, for example. Like, we are really using what's our bread and butter. We have Rogers Sports and Media, so we are providing creative services and advertising space for these equity-deserving groups to find, their way into a more equitable world. So it is really like, if we all do a little bit, we will be able to really straighten the gap over there.
And just to zero in a little bit, Philippe, so in terms of your clients' events or meetings, why is it important to incorporate equity, diversity, inclusion even at that level?
Well, full disclosure too, I am a gay South American, and I experience daily the disparities. So it is really in my DNA, and it's something I'm passionate about. As I said before, I sit on the leadership team of our employee resource group that is focused on the true LGBTQ community. So it is really front and center of everything that I do. And the word is diverse, right? Like, we need to look at it, not thinking that it is the lenses of a white man anymore. There's, different people on its colors or on its backgrounds. So our events must represent that. Here, really, one size does not fit all. Our attendees have very particular needs, and it's our obligation to find appropriate solutions.
Yeah. And Kirby, what about you? I mean, you're building your convention center. You are meetings and events. So it's incorporating it into your workplace, but also just from the perspective a little bit of why is it so important to incorporate it for your attendees, the people coming into your building as well as the people working there?
Well, I think it's really important when you look at it from the aspect of let's use Calgary as an example. If I was to take a snapshot of Calgary, and what does our demographic look like in Calgary? That's what's represented in my staff. And can we relate? And then when you invite your international delegates to the city, can we relate? And it's not necessarily about creating a safe physical space. It's also creating that psychologically safe space so that people can be themselves and relate. Because, convention centers, we're in the business of bringing people together. That I always call we're in the business of contact sport, eyeballs to eyeballs. And there's been all this virtual world where the stickiness comes is when you can be in a room together and working together and solving some life's larger challenges. We always consider ourselves a vessel. Like we may not cure cancer, but our clients do. We may not have a cure for diabetes or the latest, greatest methodologies of dealing with diabetes, so a pilot can fly a plane, but our clients do. We don't solve homelessness, but our clients do. So can we be a vessel for those tough conversations to occur and allow everybody to be their natural self? And diversity has definitely become diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I would even add on accessibility onto that, has become a big part of the business events conversation. And it is absolutely paramount that as leaders in our organizations, whether you're planning the event, you're hosting the event, you're attending the event, we all have a duty of care in recognizing that not everyone fits the same mold. And we have to stop and even think about those who may not have the visual disabilities, that may suffer from anxiety, that need to have that quiet space to go to, or that specialized chair that allows the room to disappear as you sit in it. So it is a dynamic space that we need to be in. And if anything, have that heightened sense of awareness and alertness, and making sure your staff are prepared for that as well.
I think I love hearing it from both of you. Clearly, you're engaged and down the road. And you said that, the leadership, Kirby, and I think that's really key. Whether it's the actual leader or just a champion in the organization, you need that. But I think there's so many people I talk to out there that they're a little bit nervous about getting it wrong. They're not sure that they're there yet. They're not sure if it's perfect yet. So what would you say to someone who isn't sure how to get their organization started on the path to DE&I because maybe they're a little bit nervous?
I don't think anyone gets out of bed in the morning to say, how can I screw this day up? I don't think anyone comes to work to say, how can I mess this up today? And so I think it's having as much as the courage as it is to be brave in the space and start the conversation, much like asking the question, why do you want pronouns? Can you tell me why? What do they represent? What does that look like? What does it feel like to have some unconscious bias training and have those aha moments, lived experiences where, wow, we didn't see that one coming. I would argue it's that the leadership concept of fail fast, get up and do it again. And recognize when you've misstepped. Because if you have the best of intentions, people understand. And if you set it up in a respectful manner and you conduct yourself in a respectful manner, the average person will be respectful in receiving your apology if you have misstepped. And I just had this conversation with a fellow CEO at another conference, and they said, oh, well, we're waiting for this consultant and this consultant and this consultant to provide us this information. And it's like, my friend, just get after it. You're gonna be another year before you start the conversation. Start with pronoun training, such as we did. And that just opened up so many boxes, and it allowed everyone to have a safe conversation. Take the first step. There's not a perfect route to go, but you have to start somewhere. And start small and just take those gradual steps towards it and start to be comfortable. And someone always said to me, if it feels uncomfortable, congratulations, learning is present. And to kind of embrace that knowledge that, yes, this does feel uncomfortable. And so we are learning something here. But if you approach it that I'm not here to destroy it today, and I have the best of intentions, if you take that approach, then I think it's good. And also have that internal champion or that allyship. Have that person in your organization. I mean, I'm a cisgender, middle-aged white male married with 2 children. my closest advisor identifies in the LGBT community, and I embrace that. And I don't make any move in the organization or have any form of conversation without consulting with them first to say, what don't I see here? What am I not understanding? What am I being blind to? What am I being ignorant to? And be vulnerable in those conversations. And if you get it wrong, be vulnerable and say, I screwed up. I misstepped. I misunderstood. And it's a spectacular moment when you can come together and have those aha moments and your whole team change overnight. Like, I literally felt the change in the organization overnight. When that Rainbow registration became launched, it was spectacular.
Love it. Philippe, what would you say to some organization? What would anything to add on to what Kirby said in terms of starting out that they might be nervous about? What would you say?
Yeah, I think he went over a long list, and he a lot of my thoughts were covered there. But it is really the idea that anything you do is impactful. It is meaningful for those that are on the other side. So we start small, we start doing what's attainable to you. Ask the people that are inside your organization. Kirby was just using the example, like when there is something that it's a matter that relates to the LGBT community, I go and I ask for guidance from my employees that have a different experience that I have. So it all starts there. Nowadays, many companies are at different levels on their journey. So, look at your partners, talk to them, see where they are on this journey, and like what are their practices that you can implement. There is also like some companies these days that are specialized in supporting your organization enter the journey, and follow the path. So you could piggyback on those resources as well. So it is really like about starting small and grow as you can, but just be mindful of others. Empathy, I think that's a big word.
For sure. And then in terms of, I think empathy is a big word, but also, for our meeting planners who are listening, there is, sort of practical things that are easy that they can do without having to delve into, as Kirby alluded to earlier, a big strategy and all sorts of consultants. There are some quick hits that you can do when you're planning a meeting, an event, that'll automatically make it more inclusive. Philippe, can you just share, sort of 5 tips or however many you think are sort of your favorite ones for making sure that this meeting is going to feel a little bit more inclusive? What would you say to meeting planners out there?
For sure. There's many that come top of mind. As I talk about suppliers, I think do their D&I strategy align with the ones from my organization. And, as I'm selecting a venue, I will look for a venue like the Convention Center in Calgary that, have their plan in place and are thinking about how they can really show up in that space. I think about my audience and how their needs are being tended to. If they have dietary restrictions, is my menu accommodating for that? Is the facilities that I'm using accessible? Do they have ramps? Do they have enough signage? The content of the slides that I'm using, is it visible enough? Is the font large enough? Is the colors easy to read for someone that maybe has, some difficult seeing, or even for the general population, sometimes the font is too small and you will not be able to see it. If you are thinking, after the pandemic, live streaming has become more and more common these days. People are connected through virtual events. Do the platform you are using offer accessibility tools? I think about the presenters that are, the speakers of my event. Do they reflect diversity? Do they use inclusive language? So these are just like some very practical examples that have become part of my day-to-day. They are not a checklist, but it's always like top of mind when I'm thinking, I'm planning an event. These are the important things to me. And these are some of the things that I want to consider as I go on the journey.
Thank you. No, those are great. I think this is a good practical ones. Kirby, what would you add to that?
Great points, Felipe. I would add on a couple of things. One, we all do team meetings and regular scheduled meetings with leadership teams and whatnot, or various stakeholders. And if that's the case, rotate the chair seat so that the CEO is not always hosting this meeting. I am in a cycle of 1 in 15 that actually will host the meeting and chair it. Rotate that seat around so that, again, it's not always that hierarchical position that is in a position of speaking. Ensure every communications is two-way dialogue. We're just not giving out orders, but that whole communication, there's a sender and receiver, and are they receiving what you're sending? The other big one for me is a yes and in our organization. Yes and we're not allowed to say no. You got to find the yes and. There's always a way to yes. How do we get there and how do we find it? And that path to truth and reconciliation is the same journey as our journey to the rainbow registration. Ask the question, include everyone in the solution. And for instance, even our land acknowledgement is so easy. And I had our team do it. Well, this website has a good one. Let's use this. And it was like, no, wrong approach, guys. We can't do this. Or yes, we can have a land acknowledgement and we're going to do our own program. We're going to go and do a walking land acknowledgement with an elder in the city. And we're going to create our own wording. And when we have that in our house, when someone comes and says, I need to do a land acknowledgement, I don't know what to do, we could actually deliver that for you if you would like. And so the and is in there. And then, but also being vulnerable in that space. And that is being vulnerable as well, because again, same thing, you don't want to take the wrong steps. And I think the big one is the respect that we give ourselves and our employees when you're writing policies and procedures to look at it from that lens. How are our employees going to interpret this and understand this? Is it clear language? Is it complicated language? Is it something that if someone has a language barrier, or is there barriers in the policy? So when we're doing an annual review of our policies, that's the lens we put on things. Is there barriers here that are preventing people from clearly understanding the intent and what we're doing? And so I think those are my big ones. On the event side, Felipe had a wonderful, wonderful list, and we could talk for an hour on the best ways to host meetings, because that's what we do every day.
But I do think it's interesting just to draw the two together. Internally in your organization, if you're being inclusive, those people that work for you are therefore going to translate that onto your attendees. It's always the same thing with culture. If you start at the top down and the internal culture is away, they're going to translate that into your guests or your attendees or however that goes. And I love, Philippe, that you mentioned about, when you look for a venue or a hotel or wherever to host your conferences or meetings, that, it is important to see that people are sort of mimicking or following what you're doing at Rogers and that have the same values towards that. And I think it's great that people support each other as they go out there. So thank you for mentioning that as well. Again, going back to our listeners who are sort of going, okay, this is all great, and I heard what you had to say, but what other resources, Philippe, would you recommend to people? They want to get started, they want to take some small steps. Where do you look? Like you listen to this podcast, of course, over and over and take notes, but where else do you look?
Yes, the internet has a lot of resources. It's really like, if you go in and, do a quick search, you will find many opportunities that are very much scalable to the size of your event and to your budget as well. You will also be surprised because a lot of these things don't even really need a budget to cover. If you think, for example, at your buffet height, you could, have it at the right height to accommodate folks with a wheelchair. So it starts from simple examples like that. You can, again, look at your partners and discuss with them, what are they doing? What's working well? How can you amplify what has been tested? How can you make that even better? What are the opportunities from what's been done in past? And, above all, ask questions. You have a roster of employees, you have, a diverse group of people surrounding you. So just ask questions and, exchange some thoughts and ideas. You would be surprised with all the inputs that you can get.
Yeah, I think the answer is often among the employees that you have or the colleagues that you have, because we are a diverse country and a diverse bunch of cities and areas across the country, which is great. Kirby, what would you say for people looking for resources? You mentioned and alluded earlier, which I think is a really good one, and we've said it, I guess, a couple times maybe, but just the fact that start with some training because you kind of don't know what you don't know. But what else would you say to people? Where would you recommend they look to get started on their journey?
Well, I think there's a few things. One, the biggest one for us was the biggest eye opener for us was the Canadian LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. It had their resources, an amazing point to start, and wonderful areas and resources to tap into through that group. And certainly if you're not Rainbow registered, I encourage you as a facility, as an organization to do so. The other one is, and I think we've said it once already, but start small. You don't have to take on this ambiguous, gigantic project of just start slow and build on it. And what you'll find is momentum will increase, and then you're not doing it all yourself. Your employees are actually wanting to champion things and take things on. And now we have buy-in and culture and ownership. I think be open to speaking to local champions and local organizations and work with those in the respective communities, whether it be the Indigenous community, whether it be the LGBTQ plus community. But take the leap. It's probably the biggest thing we can do. But also, you don't have to walk, you don't have to be in their shoes. Experience what it's like to walk with their shoes, walk with them. When was the last time in an organization or an event you asked them if they had a wheelchair and you get in it? From the parkade to the event, to the washroom, back to the parkade, to your table. How did that feel? How tired are your arms? What was it like to get in the elevator? And now you got to roll backwards out of it. Just live a little bit in their steps and to understand it. There's lots of organizations that will come in and do an accessibility assessment on your venue. And what's really cool is you can actually ask to have your staff put through it as well. So they'll put the foggles on or the goggles on that will give you a certain percentage of vision impairment and or complete blindness. They'll put you in a wheelchair. You'll have crutches, all these weird, wonderful things that to give the true lived experiences. I shouldn't say weird. Those are actually people's lived experiences, but true authentic experiences of what it's like to navigate your venue. And now the next time you're doing a capital improvement, you will never forget how important it is to have X in that location because of this, or the ramp. Oh, good enough will never be good enough again on a ramp after having experienced it yourself. I promise you that. We've lived it with our team. And so that would be my encouragement, is any opportunity to learn and explore and experience, do it. And remember, if it starts to feel uncomfortable, that's where the rub point is. You're learning.
I love it. Philippe, any closing thoughts from you?
Well, we have been talking about a journey, and it is really a journey of, continuous improvement and continuous learning. You may not get it right at first, but just keep going. The journey is long, but I guarantee you that the impact is very, very meaningful. And even though it may feel like extra work, it will just become, a regular practice, will become part of the process, and will feel effortless at some point. For the person that's on the receiving end, it will mean the world to them. So it is totally worth you putting a little bit of extra effort into it.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you both for joining me. You've been listening to The Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. For more information about GBTA and its work, visit gbta.org, and be sure to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, thanks for listening.